There are hundreds, literally thousands of other chemicals on lists that are called emerging contaminants. They're held in this folder called emerging contaminants. And they are not put on the list. They are not monitored, and they cannot worry about it. And so the water is slowly killing us, and we have to take it upon ourselves to fix it.
Welcome back, ladies and gents. This is the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Pakulski. One of my favorite topics that seems like it's unimportant and seems like it's a background thought for most people is the quality of your water. And while humans are constantly interacting with their environment, most people think of the environment in terms of being inside or outside, maybe you think in terms of light and air. I think of your environment as certainly encompassing the quality of our water. Certainly you can include that in your nutritional intake, but what goes into your water, what goes into your body ultimately is, I think, just an enormous impact on how we feel every day, how our health continues to progress in the right direction or potentially in the wrong direction. And with the amount of water we consume in our day-to-day life, we have to become conscious of the levels of toxicity, the levels of quality, quote unquote, in our water. Today's guest is an international water expert, Robert Slovak joins me today to discuss everything that goes into ultimately our water, some of the discoveries he's made in over the years in water innovations, and truly helping us to create the best quality water that can go into our body. You know, water is an interesting thing, and people sometimes don't think about all the potential things that could be and actually are dissolved in our municipal water supplies. Truly, if you knew what was going in there, you probably wouldn't drink it, or you knew what was in there, you probably wouldn't drink it. So finding some cost-dependent or cost-appropriate way to filter your water is something I highly suggest, literally for everyone, whether you're old or young, seeking massive increases in performance, or just want to ultimately avoid illness and disease. Quality of water has to be a consideration. And if you're not already filtering your municipal tap water, maybe it's worth looking it up, having it tested, or trying whatever is a cost-appropriate way to start filtering your water, because there's some things in there you probably wouldn't put in your body if you knew they were there. Dr. Slovak and I discuss some incredible things like reverse osmosis water. Is that the best way to go? Is how to avoid bottled water, some things about bottled water production we speak about. We talk about one of his incredible discoveries called Quinton minerals, which changed his life, saved his life when he was ill. And one of these products that I continue to use, I see a benefit from Quinton from a perspective of rehydration. I actually feel like it energizes me in the morning. I'll take a pre-workout. It's a really simple glass tube. You snap off the ends and you can consume it. Really enjoy that product and some other awesome stuff from the company he's created called Water and Wellness. He's got a great water filter system that sits on your counter that is, it's a small countertop reverse osmosis filter, which I love. I've got it actually, my kids enjoying as well. Great way to make sure my family's not getting poisoned with toxins and things that are cleaning your water. So that and so much more with my conversation today with he corrected me on that, Robert Slovak. Just incredible information overload. Dr. Slovak is also graciously offered as discounts here at the Muscle Intelligence Podcast for Water and Wellness. So if you go to waterandwellness.com, literally spell it all out, waterandwellness.com/muscle intelligence, he's hooking us up with 10% off site-wide, which includes the AquaTrue water filter, which I suggest is a countertop water filter, reverse osmosis filter, Quinton minerals, also molecular hydrogen, which we discussed a little bit in this podcast as well. Molecular hydrogen is a really great antioxidant support system that I particularly use when I travel or when I know I'm going to be undergoing a lot of oxidative stress. Like if you're in x-rays or something like that, that may be something you want to consider. Again, head over to waterandwellness.com, all spelled out, /muscle intelligence, and get hooked up with 10% off there. Another podcast sponsor for today is our friends over at Organifi. They're always providing the highest quality organic products, organic juices that allow you to ultimately consume adaptogenic blends and things that can support your immunity, your digestion, your detoxification. Organifi offers some truly exceptional products for everyone, regardless of your goals, regardless of your challenge is Organifi has something for everyone as far as taste, as far as objective. And these are all 100% organic ingredients that have been used in Ayurveda and ancient Chinese traditions. So head over to Organifi.com/muscle, use the code MUSCLE, they get hooked up with 20% off, and they've got some really, really great stuff. So without further ado, without further talking from me, enjoy the podcast with Robert Slovak. I'm an enormous nerd when it comes to health optimization and longevity. I've been doing this a long time. I came from the bodybuilding space. I was a professional bodybuilder for a long time. And as you know, that's not always the healthiest endeavor. And since retiring from that, I've taken a lot of passion, taken all that passion and kind of directed it toward what does it look like to be really, really healthy and perform at a very high level, right? So a lot of the guys that I work with personally are professional athletes, are high-level executives, entrepreneurs, and we're looking to optimize really first, as you know, like the big rocks, right? The big levers. Okay, what are those things that we must be paying attention to? And I can't think of very many things more important to optimization than water quality. And it seems like water quality is so diminished over, certainly my lifetime.
Yes.
And so I'm incredibly excited to have you on because I have 4 million questions that I have unanswered to help you with. Thanks for being here.
Yep. The answers begin with the first question, and we can go through all 4 million.
Right. Slowly over the next couple of years. So I appreciate you giving us a bit of background on kind of how you got involved with this because, reverse osmosis is an enormous thing in the world right now. Most of the listeners would know what that is. And you're the pioneer, one of the pioneers behind it. I'd love to have you maybe share the story of you being in Brazil and getting a little bit ill, and then how you kind of discovered, if that was the kind of precipice of the water journey for you.
Well, it wasn't the water, but it was the product as Quinton marine plasma. That was that discovery. But my brother and I were both, he was a physicist and chemist. I was an aeronautical and astronautical engineer. I was actually in my PhD program in astronautics, and that was during the Vietnam War. And the whole class got disbanded and drafted. But my thesis happened to be on a top secret matter, and they wouldn't let me go into the Army or any of the other services. And I got shipped off to the military industrial complex to solve some Minuteman III and ballistic missile problems, in Anaheim, California. So now I was from New York to California, and that was part of going for the healthier lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. And while my brother happened to be in top intelligence operations, actually in the same military industrial complex, we just got together and said, I don't think we like this military industrial complex stuff too much longer. And somebody said, hey, you guys, there's an emerging technology called the reverse osmosis that was discovered in 1955 by an Indian scientist at the University of Florida. And, not much has been done with it. And we just fell in love with it and started our own research. And by the early 70s, we were producing and involved with literally our own facility and laboratory in developing this technology for all of its purposes. Of course, drinking water was a natural, but we also did vending machines, laboratory water, hemodialysis, microcircuit rinsing, and I always get a laugh out of my favorite one was we developed the concept that you probably have interfaced with at least once in your life, spot-free rinsing of your car, okay? Maybe you've gone into a self-serve car wash once and selected that spot-free rinse. Well, that was our invention as well. So we went far and wide for the next 45 years doing all these applications, desalination of seawater. I mean, there's nothing we didn't touch. And then we sold our company in 1989. It ended up in the hands of 3M Corporation. And we went out in the world and to teach high-level water technology to the countries that didn't have it. And so that ended up bringing me, this is now 1996, this brought me to Brazil. I was invited to come to Brazil to help to help reinvent their water technology infrastructure, which was zero. And because it's such a mineral wealth country and you need water for all that kind of development, they didn't have it. So I went down there and developed a team to revamp their everything from their education system, their college courses. We came out with a 3-language Portuguese, Spanish, and English magazine just for South America called Agua Latino America to teach people about water technology. And then I was asked to do an experiment or research how the pollution from the remote rainforest areas that were illegally developed by industries coming in, they were digging oil wells and polluting the hell out of the rainforest to take its mineral wealth, etc. So I went out there, and the waters from those areas were going through the streams and rivers and finding their way to the big cities, Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, and the water was very toxic. It had all kinds of contaminants in it. So I went into these remote areas to see about, okay, how do we approach this? How do we fix this? And I was ended up in a very small village that didn't have any services, no doctor, no nothing. And I thought it was pretty adventurous. Every man needs those kind of adventures. And but it led to a severe case of bacterial gastroenteritis. And I thought that was as close as I came to death. And I thought that I could get evac by helicopter to a hospital and the doctors, and because I did fear for my life. And somebody on our team called Mario, he was the carpenter, and he said, "Here, this is our doctor." And he handed me 6 ampules of Quinton isotonic. Are you familiar with it enough to picture it in your mind?
Very familiar, yeah.
Okay, so it comes in glass ampules. And so I'm going, "Oh, Marcelo, hey, you're a great guy, but what are you giving me this for? Like I'm on death's door." And he said, "This is our doctor. I know this will at least help you. Take 6 of these, in 1 per hour for the rest of the day, and then we'll see how you feel and get you some more." And so I took those 6 ampules. This is so burned into my head. I was in as bad a shape as you could be. Took those 6 ampules, and 8 to 9 hours later, I was completely healed, and thought I literally thought I was either dead, and in a whole nother matrix, or this stuff, like something about this stuff was very magical. So I got up and showered and ran to the only place that's open in the town at night, and that was the bar. And I knew all the men would be there. And I ran down to that bar, maybe 3/4 of a kilometer away, ran down to that bar with the empty little case of Quinton. And I said, "Marcelo," he said, "Robert, come have the cerveja, blah, blah, blah." I'm going, "No cerveja, I need more of this stuff." And he said, "We'll get some tomorrow." And so I was so fascinated with that. That changed my career. And it changed my interest into health and wellness. And I stayed there for 2 more years to study under an Argentine biologist about Quinton. We actually went to his house once just so I could say, "What is this stuff?" And I stayed there until 7:00 in the morning. He was so generous in telling me about a scientist, a revolutionary biologist of the late 1800s, who made a discovery that was so suppressed for the next 120 years, as it is even today, because it is one of the great discoveries of health and healing that I am aware of. So because it's so foundational, and almost no doctor really realizes why is it so foundational. So this is, when I asked Marcelo, "Hey, what is this stuff?" He said, "It's just from the sea. That's all I know."
Before we get into Quinton, I'd love to know, what is it? Because I think the audience...
Okay, Quinton is harvested from the ocean.
Yep.
Okay. So its basis is ocean water, And the ocean water, it's only harvested in very select and rare places that have high density plankton blooms. And these blooms are because the blooms are they are an assemblage of phytoplankton, the vegetable plankton, and zooplankton, the animal plankton. Animal plankton might be microscopic shrimp called copepods. Okay, krill is a zooplankton, and then plankton is hangs out at the surface where there's sun, and zooplankton hangs out like 150 to 200 meters below that, and they are in like this envelope called the plankton bloom, and it's also called the zone of biocenosis because it's the most complex bioreactor in the world. And it also, the plankton blooms of the planet make 50 to 60% of the oxygen. So you can see they can never be disrupted, okay? And so they are monitored, and they're not talked about a lot because there is a fear among oceanography, industry that these are delicate, and with how demonic things can be on our planet, people worried for 50 years that these could be contaminated and destroyed, and there goes the planet. So they are monitored exquisitely by satellite, by buoys, by ships, etc., all around the world. So the Oceanographic Institutes of the world keep track of this, and Laboratoires Quinton relies on the Oceanographic Institute of Madrid to give them the precise locations where these certain conditions that are covered under the Quinton patent are maintained. And they send ships there and harvest it 1,000 liters in 1,000-liter pharmaceutical carboys. They bring it back to land, put it in trucks that are at 4 degrees centigrade, and then it's brought to the factory, kept under refrigeration until it's in those glass ampules. So it's done fastidiously, has to be done perfectly, or else there's not the right interactions. All the phyto and zooplankton and other microorganisms are removed from Quinton during the processing phase. And it ends up because Quinton was using this as a major medicine in the early 1900s. So a major it was at that time in the early 1900s. There was just like potions and herbs and things for the diseases that were the multiple pandemics of the day. It included cholera, tuberculosis, syphilis, typhoid, influenza, you name it. And it was killing, in Europe, it was killing 50,000 people a month. And so Quinton immediately was employed with 69, they were called marine dispensaries. 69 marine dispensaries were opened throughout Europe, I think 7 or 8 countries, and also in North Africa where cholera was rampant. And it was used for the next 25 years to deal with these multiple epidemics and pandemics.
Has there been any studies done in last X number of years, kind of acknowledging mechanism? So we know this is having amazing benefits.
Yeah, the mechanism is now you probably have been exposed to, or even more, about the germ versus the terrain theory.
Yep.
Okay. So in the middle to end of the 1800s, which is the 19th century, there was like a little war going on in medicine. In fact, there were multiple wars. There was the emergence of the Rockefeller-based medicines that constitute modern medicine today, as flawed as it is. Claude Bernard, the so-called father of modern physiology, in the 1850s, he was the one who really cut people apart and studied it. And he said, hey, all the cells of the body are just swimming in a fluid. And they called that the extracellular fluid. And he said, it's like they're just like fish in the water. And then Antoine Béchamp really did the definitive experiments and wrote treatises on it. And his adversary happened to be Louis Pasteur, who was the germ guy, okay? And he was funded by big industry and so on, and they wanted to drive it to the fact that germs are what bring disease to humanity. And Claude Bernard said, hey, yeah, germs can bring disease to humanity, but what determines whether they affect you, the status of your terrain, okay? And this is so big, but it's so elusive. It's almost hard to believe. So the terrain, you've heard that we're, 60 to 65% water, right? And this is in compartments. There's there's the compartments of the body that hold water in various states. And the basis of this water, called extracellular water, is held in the envelope of all of our cells, and it's called the extracellular matrix. And the extracellular matrix contains the water, and it contains a matrix of things in which the cells are suspended, and it has its own physiological mechanisms that are vast, biophotons, energy waves that are conducted in this complex extracellular matrix. But Quinton realized the fluid was the key, and that all he did was to change the fluid, okay, of these women. Let's say we're talking about the birth subject. He changed the fluid of the woman, and starting with the amniotic fluid, because that's where the fetus is growing. That's where it's receiving. But what the key is that I'm getting to is, what if he determined, what is the fluid? What's so cool about it? What's special about it? What gets wrong about it? And he said, all life inherited its terrain, its fluid composition, its energy, etc., from 2.5 billion years of evolution in the sea. It's just seawater. By 4 billion years ago, you end up with an ocean that is the only known solution of water and the entire periodic table of the elements. That will be the most important thing that I could say on this podcast. Doctors, this is just, I don't know, it's a little above the pay grade of most doctors to see the impact of this, that life started in, evolved in, and then proceeded to remain in for over 2 billion years. All life remained just in the solution of water and the periodic table. Like, holy mackerel. So that just rung so, I go, oh my God. So the structure and function, the architect of life's design was from the single cell, which were called prokaryotes, to now, it was all designed by really the influence of the ocean. It was their entire environment. It was the extracellular fluid of all life forms. And René Quinton put this together. And he said, wow. And when you compare the electrolytes in the ocean to a healthy person's extracellular fluid composition, all the elements are in the same proportions as the ocean. That's how, and René Quinton, they couldn't test even a fifth of the elements because they didn't have the technology. But as they did test, they go, oh my God, the human body has the same proportion of sodium as it does to magnesium, as it does to calcium, as it does to potassium. Holy mackerel. We obviously inherited through evolution the periodic table in our, what would be called the ideal extracellular fluid.
I'm curious how they maintain quality, and is it variable kind of batch to batch?
It's not, because it's chosen. And this thing we call the plankton bloom first of all, I really understand ocean pollution, okay? And it is like, the ocean is outrageously able to maintain, a purity just because it's 30,000 meters deep in places, So, and the currents mix it up, etc. But you do have a special situation in the plankton plume, because in that zone of biocenosis, the zooplankton and phytoplankton, as you might guess, are natural detoxifiers. They're like your immune system in your body in the ocean. So they detox things. And the purity of this water, now you can understand, coming from a very varied and deep science background, you can imagine the first time I go to Laboratories Quinton, I'm asking questions of, they entertain me for a week. I'm asking questions like, okay, how do you assure the water is pure? And they told me all about the detoxification natural of this giant plankton bloom. And these plankton blooms are, 50 to 100 kilometers across. They're not like little, wade pools. They're just huge. And so they have a lot of power. And the zooplankton, much like cows in a farm, ascend up on a regular basis into the phytoplankton. Okay, they, swim up or whatever it's called. They swim up and consume the phytoplankton, just like cows going to pasture, and then they come back down. And this whole thing is, biocenosis, this rare process that goes on. So I said, well, let's go over, like, you obviously are a pharmaceutical company or have met all the qualifications of one. You make a natural product, but I want to see, where do you test the quality of the contaminants in it? Because everybody is going to ask, well, isn't the sea polluted? And they go, totally wrong. Certainly along the coastline, the sewage disposals and so on, it's polluted where ships come in. But in plankton blooms, that's why they're monitored, so we never disturb them. And so he said, look at these analyses. We do analysis right here. They have a very sophisticated laboratory for QC, but they also send it out to 2 other independent people to analyze, like the contaminants, everything, radionuclides, pesticides, herbicides, all the elements, heavy metals, they do everything. And I was shocked at the purity of this water naturally right from the ocean, because it was the United States Pharmacopoeia, USP, has standards for like anything you eat, for your food, for your supplements, and so on. And supplements are pretty rigid standards. But I looked at the contaminant lists allowed by USP, like, how much cadmium can a vitamin have, et cetera, et cetera. And I looked at the analysis of the seawater, and it was do any of the contaminants show up? Yes, of every contaminant, because contaminants are the periodic table too. So it's really like the amount of contaminants. Now, many of the contaminants are below even detection level, but the ones they can detect are 1,000 to 1/10,000 of the standards of the USP. It's like ultra pure water. And it's because of this biocenosis, self-purifying event in the ocean. Anyway, is that clear?
Yeah, absolutely clear. Can you tell me about the isotonic versus the hypertonic?
So the hypertonic is the ocean water itself, undiluted, unchanged. They take the ocean water, but it goes through very sophisticated processing, not to alter its delicate properties. Because you can imagine there's not just the elements of the periodic table. There's 100 or maybe 200 micronutrients, probably many of which aren't even discovered. There's DNA, RNA, antifungals, antibiotic, phytonutrients. You can just go down the list of things and what is also in Quinton. They rarely talk about it, but it's there and it's studied, et cetera, et cetera. So you have this vast amount of micronutrients that also are part of ketones. Brilliant.
You take it, Robert.
How do I? I take it. I've taken it since I brought ketone to America in 2005 and started to teach it, et cetera, et cetera. So I take, let me just resume one thing that I was on, and that is about the contaminants. So it goes through processes that remove any microorganism, including the phytoplankton and zooplankton. And it ends up, Laboratories Ketone makes everything they do is made to a level of pharmaceutical sterility and apyrogenicity. So sterility you get, there's no microbes in it, okay? Blah, blah, blah. Or it's below some pharmaceutical level. Do you know the word pyrogen?
I don't.
Okay, pyrogen are fragments of bacteria that activate our immune system, okay? I mean, they're called pyrogen because that's what gives you a fever. So when bacteria deteriorate and fall apart and go through their own kind of autophagy, then they give off particles that our immune system is tuned into because it's saying, bacteria are dying. That means there must be a lot of them and then blah, blah, we got to react to it. So you get a fever from the pyrogen. So you obviously don't want to take anything that gives you, especially a product that's injected now. This wouldn't hurt you if you ingested it orally, but they were making a medicine. Ketone comes out at the level of a pharmaceutical medicine. And so it's sterile and apyrogenic. Now, this cannot be done in the United States, but the product can be subcutaneously injected and it can be IV'd. In both world wars, World War I and World War II, ketone was used as the reserve blood plasma. Okay? Because okay, back to your question. Hypertonic is just as it comes from the ocean after processing. And then it's all done under refrigeration. And then it's immediately, when it's confirmed it's sterile and apyrogenic, it goes into the glass ampules and is sealed. It can be used for 20 years once it's in the glass ampule. And it's put also in liter bottles. And it's also put in a lesser form. We don't consider this, it's only fairly recently, in sachets, like little packets, for people to travel with and only use orally, okay? So I take this, okay, so what's the difference? There's the hypertonic, which is the seawater itself, 33,000 parts per million of periodic table, and then it's diluted with a very special spring water that has to be have the composition defined by René Quinton. And this spring water is used to dilute the hypertonic to make isotonic. Now, isotonic is made because that's what can be IV'd. You don't IV hypertonic. That is your blood plasma once you make isotonic. But all the proportions of the elements are remain the same. You're just diluting it.
Seems like an incredibly powerful product. I've tried it myself. I suggested to all of my clients, and I effectively view it as, you can tell me if this is incorrect, as a multi-mineral supplement that ultimately helps with hydration.
Good. Let me expand that a little bit. A multi-mineral, multi-trace supplement.
Yep.
The trace elements are 100 times more rare and more important to the body because you never get them from food.
Right.
You definitely get your calcium, magnesium, potassium, iron, etc. from foods, but you don't get those other 60 trace elements. It's gone from food. It's been farmed out of the soil. So here's how I think of it. The isotonic, I tell people this, if you are not well, if something's not right with you, use isotonic. It is the medicine, so to speak, even though we're not allowed to even use the word medicine, but just metaphorically, it's the medicine. Hypertonic is the nutrient. when you are well and you want to maintain that high performance, etc., of every aspect of your life, you maintain your extracellular matrix with the hypertonic.
Can we talk a little bit about just water and the reverse osmosis process?
Come on, drag me in there.
Yeah, the water in our world seems like the quality is obviously a big challenge. It's really deteriorating. Some people say that obviously reverse osmosis water is exceptional. Other people say, hey, you know what, lacks minerals. You have to remineralize it. There's obviously spring water, and there's desalinated ocean water, and there's bottled waters that come from all these different places. And I would love to kind of parse through, what you discovered in your research of reverse osmosis, what you're removing, and what is the best source of water for people to be drinking on a consistent basis.
Okay, man, that's just a great set of questions. So obviously the contaminants of today are not the contaminants of Rene Canton's time, for instance. Okay, in that ensuing time, over 80,000 just industrial chemicals have been made. And we don't have to tell anybody, just this recent Ohio train derailment released some of the most toxic substances known to man. And it's inexcusable and how it was handled. But so there are many categories of contaminants. There are the inorganic ones that can include lead, mercury, cadmium, radionuclides. Okay, they're elements too, right? So they're in the periodic table. They just you're designed, because they were in the ocean too. You're designed to be able to handle a certain level of almost any member of the periodic table. But then we have synthetic, a category called SOCs, synthetic organic chemicals, that include all the pesticides, the glyphosates, all the chemicals that are used every day. The PFASs and PFOSs, which are the non-slip, non-stick, water repellent chemicals. That's like everywhere. I think every single person on Earth that's been tested, their blood has been tested, has the presence of PFOAs and PFASs. Okay, and that's just horrible. I mean, it shocks me. And then we have the volatile organic chemicals that can include most of the petroleum solvents, all that stuff that are used by the millions of gallons at airports and military bases, etc., cleaning the hulls of ship. These are the VOCs. Then you have the new generation of pharmaceuticals. They're showing up in our water too. Okay, all the people throw it down their drain, and you all know that our municipal wastewater is more often than not recycled and reprocessed, and then you can't get all that stuff out. Okay, so pharmaceuticals, endocrine disruptors are all in there. I mean, this is changing our hormone levels. This is what's really allowing us to have to adjust to a new world of non-normalcy. This is the basis of it. I'm going to be starting to do podcasts on this world of non-normalcy, because people think it's some kind of social awakening, and to some degree it is, but we have been really changed by the last 75 years of these chemicals in everything, the food, you name it. So that's a great concern. And then you have the radiological things that get in the water from reactor leaks and Fukushima, and on and on and on. And then we have the microbial and cyst category of that can be in water. So you have this whole set of categories, each with potentially hundreds of contaminants. So the EPA and Congress get to decide what contaminants and what levels can be in municipal tap water. This amounts to less than 100. But there are hundreds, literally thousands of other chemicals on lists that are called emerging contaminants. They're held in this folder called emerging contaminants. And they are not put on the list. They are not monitored, and they cannot worry about it. And there is a practical reason. If you started to take the emerging contaminants and assured that your water treatment technology for a municipal area had to remove them to certain levels, it would be like buying Dom Perignon coming out of your tap. You couldn't afford the water. And they know this. And so the water is slowly killing us, and we have to take it upon ourselves to fix it. I say that there are only two methods known that can reduce the level of every single category of these categories I said, inorganics, heavy metals, SOCs, VOCs. There's only two technologies. Actually, they're combinations of technologies that are capable of doing it. That is reverse osmosis plus activated carbon. And all of these have to be the right thing and the right type and all that. And distillation plus activated carbon. That's it. And then when you get all the other things, I'm so embarrassed that my industry in combination with the internet has become, and I'm not saying my colleagues, but the industry of water has become just like fake media news. It's just lying after lying after lying. I'd say 95% of all things that I read promoting water purifiers on the internet are lying. Okay? And I get such well-meaning people. And when the biggest lie is that a shower filter can do something. Okay? That's one of the big lies at the top of my list. They can't.
I know you're an advocate of the AquaTrue and someone who has helped develop that. I have it. I think it's a great unit. However, I'd also love some suggestions or advice on what's the best full house unit for those homeowners out there. Like, what can we get an RO in our house?
No, RO water. Let me just say, put this is kind of showing my age, a kibosh on the whole house RO. Okay. The whole house RO, and frankly, my brother and I put in the first whole house RO in Newport Beach, and it was a disaster. Okay, more of what we didn't know about the potential problems, but not to mention that I was very happy that the man was a billionaire because he didn't mind his house being flooded with 4 feet of water. And so be that as it may, that was our first experience. But the materials of your plumbing, your piping, your fixtures, etc., are not compatible with RO water. Okay, and it's a big waste of money to have to do that for all of your for all of the water in your house, because RO involves you have to waste water, so to speak, to make RO water. So I don't agree. Now, if Jeff Bezos came and said, "Hey, I don't care, I'm on a RO system in my house," he could do it and have somebody operate it like full time and do it right. But you have to adjust the pH. You have to make sure it's not too corrosive. You have to put in anti-corrosives to it so it doesn't screw up your house. Okay, so that's one thing. So nix the idea of whole house RO or certainly whole house distillation is not practical. But for point of use, my brother and I were the first really developers and teachers and so on for what we call an under sink reverse osmosis. It is the most popular form of reverse osmosis, and I and my brother helped get it there. There are millions sold per year. Since I became aware and involved in the health and wellness aspect of water more, when I started to teach and travel and so on, I realized more about people's immune system. I realized about the microbiome. I realized that children with autism usually have gut problems and due to a challenged microbiome. But what I realized is that under sink RO systems have an inherent flaw, and that the storage tank of RO systems that are under sink become microbial incubators, and I do not recommend them. The first time I gave a talk at an Autism One conference, it was life-changing for me because I stood before an audience of 150 mothers, and I said, yes, I'm the inventor of, or probably most person recognized for the under sink RO. But when you leave this, I want you to promise me you will not give your under sink RO water to your child with autism. Okay? And that was like a big shock. That was one of the shocks to everybody. So I said, listen, there are ways to minimize it, and there are ways you can fix it. But you're just not going to use the water directly for your son with autism because the organisms are too high. Now, when my brother and I started in 1973 to make RO systems, membranes made 5 gallons per day. Okay, 5 gallons per day. And so it was more common for people, the majority of people like ran out of water, okay? And they said, how can we get more? But the industry in its natural technological development and lust to make bigger is better, the membranes went from 5 to 10 to 15 to 24 to 36. Now the typical under sink RO system is making 50 to 75 gallons per day. That's its capacity, okay? But the tank is just this 2 gallon or 2.5 gallon tank. And this tank never gets emptied by the majority of people. And it just sits in there with bacteria happier than anything. They're saying, wow, there's no movement, there's nothing. And the materials of construction are very favorable. The materials like the plastics, the butyl rubber diaphragm feed the bacteria. The rubber diaphragm is like a Las Vegas smorgasbord for microbes. So I tell them, listen, you can drain, for you with children with autism, you can drain your system every night when you're done. Before you go to bed, drain the system completely. And then you will keep making fresh water and you will lower, but not eliminate. And you're not going to eliminate all bacteria, and because your body can handle it, but you're going to lower it measurably. I also tell them if they have children, if they want, even if they do drain their RO system, to also purchase something called a Sterilite. It's a little it's like 3 times bigger than a magic marker that has a little UV system and a battery in it, and you just put it in the water and it turns on for 30 seconds and sterilizes the water. I recommend that. But that's what caused me to transform to recommending only at this time of life, until this problem, maybe it can be solved in the next 5 years, but a countertop RO that one can access, clean, and observe the storage tank, okay? And it doesn't have any adverse materials of construction, et cetera, et cetera. And the newest iteration, it's not quite fully manifested in the marketplace yet, has a glass pitcher as the receiver. So that's kind
of read my mind.
So, but I've always taught people are too afraid of plastics, okay? And the plastic really used for for the original AquaTrue is, its name escapes. It's the most pure plastic. It's the one used in the Vitamix, okay? The Vitamix food processor. It is, I don't even worry about it, but people really look at that whole plasticizer, volatiles given off by plastics wrong. And they worry about a plastic pitcher in which water is in there for whatever, a half an hour or days. That doesn't matter. First of all, the one cannot even measure what one of that new plastics puts in the water. There's no endocrine disruptors, etc. But they don't realize that they are living, we're living in a sea of plastic. The paint on our walls, the fabrics on our sofas, the carpets that we walk on every day. And then finally, when we get out of the house, we walk into a virtual tomb of plasticizers called our car. Because the car is 100% plastic. So the plastics in our environment that we get every day is 1,000,000 times greater than a plastic container or even a plastic bottle. So anyway, that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, and again, it's the just ubiquitous nature. It's just everywhere, isn't it? It's in your drinking water. It's in your air. It's in food. It's just everywhere. It's salt.
Yeah, and this is This is a somewhat recent, maybe 10 years realization of mine, and you're having it too. And it's like, wow, we're not living correctly.
Mm-hmm. So, Robert, I want to dive into a little bit about hydrogen and molecular hydrogen. I know this is a kind of relatively recent to the market, and I've heard some people very, very big on its potential benefits. And it sounds like you're someone who is an expert in the field, and I'd love to have you share your thoughts and maybe the applications and benefits of molecular.
Well, my biggest contribution to it was developing the popular hydrogen tablet in 2010. And I did that in a small laboratory, and it was really more of an exercise to see if I could do it. Okay, and there was I didn't even know in 2010, and it wasn't common information as it is now. I didn't really even dig into the health benefits of hydrogen until I started to read and was influenced by Tyler LeBaron, who is just a fantastic scientist, etc., who runs the Molecular Hydrogen Institute. .com. You should go on his website. It has more than you guys are going to learn from me on this. It was a surprise to the world of science and biology of molecular hydrogen. Now, understand that hydrogen in the universe is in the form of atoms, just H, proton and electron, but molecular hydrogen, hydrogen is like, it's looking for something to fill its shells. So it loves to link up with another hydrogen to make the molecule of hydrogen H2. And that's what we're talking about. Not atomic hydrogen, but molecular hydrogen. So I just want to clarify that for everybody. And there's, life was helped by hydrogen gas a lot in its early days. And we had more hydrogen in the atmosphere than we do now. A lot of the development of cellular life was conducted with the benefit of hydrogen. And now hydrogen is very, very sparse in the atmosphere, like 0.00005% of the atmosphere is hydrogen, molecular hydrogen. But anyway, at Nagoya University, some brilliant Japanese scientists started to look at hydrogen and its characteristic in the body, and they were rightfully shocked. One, they learned that the body's microbiome is already a hydrogen manufacturer. About an ideal healthy person makes 1 liter of hydrogen per day, and it's used in the body. Now, with all the studies that have been done, and there's literally, there's probably 1,500 fantastic studies on hydrogen's benefits. But if there's one thing that it does, it is involved in the many pathways, and we won't go into it because it just takes hours with all these unique terms most of the audience may have never heard of. It addresses oxidative stress. That is the word. And the reason oxidative stress is used is partly because you're not allowed technically to talk about inflammation. Okay, this is a word that's owned only by TV sold pharmaceutical products. So oxidative stress, it has an incredible ability to address oxidative stress. It has an incredible ability to act as a regulator in the body's antioxidant system, which consists of glutathione and a superoxide dismutase. I can't think of the other enzyme that is part of that main, and I'll think of it, main antioxidant system, but it regulates your antioxidant system. It acts as a signaling molecule between cells. Okay, this is very critical, a critical balance that science is just learning about. So there's 2 ways to take it. I think you want to get into the practical thing. They're generally by infusing water with it. So there's infused water, and then there's inhaled hydrogen gas. Okay, And both have their own benefits, but certainly the most practical, economical, etc., is to infuse hydrogen into water. And it's also most of the studies the Japanese did to confirm the remarkable benefits of hydrogen, molecular hydrogen, was done with hydrogen-infused water. Okay? Now, inhaled hydrogen requires a fairly expensive device in the thousands of dollars. Infusing water with hydrogen can mean throwing a tablet in 10 ounces of water, and you get a very high concentration gradient of hydrogen in that. In our tablet, Aqua H2 Ultra tablet, you get 8 to 10 parts per million of hydrogen. If you make hydrogen in a little device, and I will say any amount of hydrogen has a benefit, okay? So if you make hydrogen in a bottle, you've seen all these bottles, they cost whatever, $100 to $200, and they bubble hydrogen up and it dissolves. When you're making hydrogen in water with that method, with you're electrolyzing water and making the hydrogen, or you're using something called, or that device uses something called a proton exchange membrane to extract the hydrogen and put it in the water, it's limited to less than 2 parts per million. Okay? And it's limited because at atmospheric pressure, that method, hydrogen can't dissolve anymore in it. So, but if you drink it all the time, then you're getting enough hydrogen. You know, I pursued the tablet just because I thought it was the most convenient, and I travel a lot and I could just throw it in anything, a bottle of bottled water or something, and I'm making a highest concentration.
Yeah. Is this a once a day type of thing, Robert, or is it multiple times a day as like a more better situation?
It depends on where you're at in terms of your health. I would take I take a tablet of regular hydrogen, our brand, which is Active H2 Ultra, and I also take Active H2 Chromax. I take one of each a day.
What's the difference?
One of them, they look identical. One contains the chromium to help people because hydrogen is involved in metabolism. This adds Chromax as a thing to address something called metabolic syndrome, which is kind of the word for prediabetes. Mm-hmm. So it adds that chromium factor, and it's a very well-known, proven product called Chromax, and we add it to the tablet. So, you know, I don't get enough chromium, so I take one tablet of regular hydrogen and one tablet of Chromax. And if things are going wrong that reflect, let's say, oxidative stress in my body, inflammation somewhere, like an injury is inflammation, okay? I may take more. I may take even 2 more tablets. You can OD on hydrogen, okay? It's just a matter of, well, it's costing me more. Also, it's externally powerful. I was pretending to be you one day a number of years ago, and was challenged by somebody who is like you to go on a canyon that was behind my house, and it's kind of a race, okay, a little bit, okay? And he was pushing me, and it's a canyon I knew, but he didn't know, and it's incredibly rugged and difficult challenge. And I ended up saying I knew this very steep down path with which you had to almost like jump from side to side because it was so messed up. And I thought I could overtake him on this, and I did. I just totally tumbled down, head over feet, and came in, landed in the bushes. I ended up fracturing both of my ankles. Okay. Mm-hmm. And got to the emergency, make a long story short, got to the emergency room, got a lecture from the doctor on why a 70-year-old guy was doing such a stupid thing. So what I did was, and I didn't even know, nobody was even talking about it at the time. I went home and with crutches, a wheelchair, and so on. And I just said, well, I'm marooned to my house at this table. I'm going to set up my computer, and I'm going to get this plastic box of cool water, and I'm going to throw in 25 tablets of hydrogen tablets, okay? And I didn't know anything about how many I should use, but I just threw it in and kept throwing them in as they dissolved. And I will tell you that after 3 days, I was able to walk without pain, okay? And this blew my mind. By the 10th day, I was lightly jogging in my community, okay? So it is topically incredibly powerful. And so, anyway.
Well, I've experimented with a little bit, and I'll definitely do some more now that I've got some unique insights from you. Quinton is something that definitely everyone should check out, and the AquaTrue as well as molecular hydrogen are all available on your website, waterandwellness.com. You can go to waterandwellness.com/muscle-intelligence to get a discount. Robert Slovak, thank you for the wisdom. I'm truly grateful for all the information and for continued research into what you do.
Hope we can do this again.
Love to.
Appreciate the time and appreciate you inviting me to podcast with you.
Likewise, and for making time in the middle of
wonderful day.
Yes. Thank you. That's a wrap, ladies and gents. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Robert Slovak. A lot of information here, certainly about reverse osmosis, about Quinton. It's definitely something he's passionate about, as you can see. And I have vetted the product. I use it myself. I do see a benefit in for everyone really consuming some type of electrolyte product or multi-mineral product that Quinton provides. And you'll see a benefit. You'll see a difference in energy, in the way your body feels. It's a cool format as well. It's got a bit of a wow factor too. When you're cracking a glass of Ampule and drinking it, it tastes horrible. If I'm being honest, it tastes like salt water, but the benefits seem to outweigh the suffering. So thank you very much to Robert Slovak for being here and his gracious offer to provide you 10% off at Water and Wellness. You go to waterandwellness.com/muscle-intelligence. Also, a big shout out to our show sponsor for today, Organifi. One of my favorite products that I use when I'm looking for a sweet treat before bed and avoiding those desserts that we know we should be doing to avoid growing our waistline. Organifi Gold is just a truly delicious product. It's got reishi, it's got turkey tail, it's got some calming alternatives to melatonin, which I know some people want to avoid. So it doesn't necessarily leave you feeling groggy the next morning, but it allows you to calm down before bed and after dinner. It comes in this delicious golden milk flavor, and also they've got a chocolate flavor now that just remarkable flavor as well. If you're someone who wants a sweet tooth, who likes to take something that actually has side benefits as well, you'll enjoy that product from Organifi. Head over to Organifi.com, use the code MUSCLE. Ladies and gents, if you are not already subscribed to the Muscle Intelligence podcast, we are doing our best to bring you the best information in the world from the best experts, to help you understand what goes into living your greatest life in a body of love. If you enjoy this podcast, I would appreciate it if you share with at least one person you know and love who is aspiring to look good, feel good, and perform at their best every single day, so we can support each other. Ladies and gents, have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning into Muscle Intelligence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to share it with at least one person you know. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Pakulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.